Feeling blessed that we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam with everyone on this very auspicious day, as every day is our Srimad Bhagavatam Shravan time. So we'll share the screen and start reading our verse, and then we can go ahead with that. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet Shrinvatam Svakatha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridiyantasto hi abhadrani vidunoti sruhit satam Nashtaprayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya Bhagavati uttama shlokir bhakti bhavati naishtikir. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 12, verse number 18. Today we are on verse number 18. We'll sing the verse first. Bhaktim harau bhagavati pravahannajasram Ananda bashpakalaya muhur ardhyamanaha Viklityamana hridaya pulakachitango Natmanam asmarat asaviti muktalingaha Bhaktim harau bhagavati pravahannajasram Ananda bashpakalaya muhur ardaya manaha Viklityamana hridaya pulakachitango Natmanam asmarad asaviti muktalingaha Bhaktim harau bhagavati pravahan ajasram Ananda bashpakalaya muhurardhyamanaha Viklidyamana hridayah pulakachitango Natmanam asmarad asaviti muktalingaha. Are there any volunteers who would like to read?
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavat Pranam, Prabhu.
Let me read it, please.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Bhaktim haro bhagavati prabannam majasram Ananda bashpakalaya mahu artamano Viklit manoridaya pulaka chitango Natmanam ashmaradasho iti muktalinga. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Can I try, Mataji?
Yes, Mataji, please.
Bhaktim haro bhagavati pravahan ajasram Ananda bashpakalaya muhur ardyamanaha Viklidyamana hridaya pulakachitango Natmanam asmaradasaviti muktalingaha. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna Mataji, I am also trying.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Yes, please.
Bhaktim harao bhagavati prabham ajasram Anandam bashpakal kalla muhur ardhamanaha Vikliddhamana hridaya pulakachitango Namatmanam asmaradashaviti muktalingaha. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Yes, Mataji, please.
Bhaktim haro bhagavati prabhana jasram Ananda bashpakalaya muhurardhamanaha Viklidyamana hridaya pulakachitango Natmanam asmaradashaviti muktalingaha. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So we can read the synonyms now, word by word. Bhaktim. Synonyms translation and purport by by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Bhaktim, devotional service. Harau, unto Hari. Bhagavati, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Pravahan, constantly engaging in. Ajasram, always. Ananda, blissful. Bashpa Kalaya, by the stream of tears. Again and again. Ardhyamana, being overcome. Viklidyamana, melting. Hridayaha, his heart. Pulaka, standing of hairs. Achita, covered. Anga, his body. Na, not. Atmanam, body. Asmat, he remembered. Asau, he. Iti, thus. Mukta linga, free from the subtle body. So we can read the translation, and would someone like to read the translation?
I'll try. Thank you. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Because of his transcendental bliss, incessant tears flowed from his eyes, his heart melted, and they were shivering and standing off the hairs all over his body. Thus transformed in trance of devotional service, Dhruva Maharaj completely forgot his bodily existence, and thus he immediately became liberated from material bondage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Is there any volunteer for reading the purport as well? This is a big purport, so 2-3
Hare
devotees
Krishna
can.
Mataji.
Yes, Hare Krishna Prabhu, can you please start?
Okay. Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Due to constant engagement in devotional service, hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping the deity, etc., as prescribed in 9 varieties, there are different symptoms which appear in the body of a devotee. These 8 bodily transformations, which indicate that a devotee is already liberated within himself, are called Ashtasadvika Vikara. When a devotee completely forgets his bodily existence, he should be understood to be liberated. He is no longer encaged in the body. The example is given that when a coconut becomes completely dry, the coconut pulp within the coconut shell separates from the bondage of the shell and the outer covering. By moving the dry coconut, one can hear that the pulp within is no longer attached to the shell or to the covering. Similarly, when one is fully absorbed in devotional service, he is completely disconnected from the 2 material coverings, the subtle and the gross bodies. Sorry. Dhruva Maharaj actually attained this stage of life by constantly discharging devotional service. He has already been described as a Mahabhagavata. For unless one becomes Mahabhagavata or a first-class pure devotee, these symptoms are not visible. Lord Chaitanya exhibited all these symptoms. Thakur Haridas also exhibited them. And there are many pure devotees who manifested such bodily symptoms. They are not to be imitated, but when one is actually advanced, these symptoms are exhibited. At that time, it is to be understood that a devotee is materially free. Of course, from the beginning of devotional service, the path of liberation immediately opens. Just as the coconut taken from the tree immediately begins to dry. It is simply takes some time for the shell and the pulp to be separated from one another. An important word in this verse is Mukta Linga. Mukta means liberated. Linga means the subtle body. When a man dies, he quits the gross body, but the subtle body of mind, intelligence, and ego carries him to a new body. While existing in the present body, the same subtle body carries him from one stage of life to another. For example, from childhood to boyhood by mental development. The mental condition of a baby is different from that of a boy. The mental condition of a boy is different from that of a young man. And the mental condition of a young man is different from that of an old man. So at the death, the process of changing bodies takes place due to subtle body. The mind, intelligence, and ego carry the soul from one gross body to another. This is called transmigration of the soul. But there is another stage when one becomes liberated even from the subtle body at the time of the living entity is competent and fully prepared to be transferred to the transcendental or spiritual world. The description of the bodily symptoms of Sri Dhruva Maharaj makes it apparent that he became perfectly fit to be transformed to the spiritual world. One can experience the distinction between the subtle and the gross bodies even daily. In a dream, one gross body is lying on the bed while the subtle body carries the soul, the living entity, to another atmosphere. But because the gross body has to be continued, the subtle body comes back and settles in the present gross body. Therefore, one has to become free from the subtle body also. This freedom is also known as Mukta Linga. Hare Krishna Mataji.
Krishna, thank you,
Beautiful
Prabhuji.
performed.
So this is a wonderful translation and purport and verse. So before we actually understand these verses, let's pray. Om Agyan Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bir Krishna Das Goswami Niti Namine. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. So this is such a wonderful verse that Srila Prabhupada has given us very clear explanation and very clear elaborated statements. There's nothing very confusing about this verse. So we'll just begin with a bit of a background. This chapter being Dhruv Maharaj goes back to Godhead. So we are coming towards the end of Dhruv Maharaj's pastime. And as we see, Maitreya Muni is talking about Dhruv Maharaj to Vidur. And again, in the previous verse, we discussed about Ashtanga Yoga. So Dhruv Maharaj once again does Ashtanga Yoga, but this time he's doing this with bhakti. So yesterday we learned that Dhruv Maharaj purified his senses, bathed regularly, yama niyama. All the processes of Ashtanga Yoga was nicely elaborated and explained to us by Her Grace Sita Mataji. And he practiced sitting postures, controlled his breathing, withdrew his senses, meditated on the Archa Vigraha, and entered into trance samadhi. And then as we see this verse today, it's very, very beautiful what happens when he enters into samadhi. So we'll read the translation one more time. Because of his transcendental bliss, incessant tears flowed from his eyes. His heart melted, and there was shivering and standing of the hairs all over his body. Thus transformed in a trance of devotional service, Dhruv Maharaj completely forgot his bodily existence, and thus he immediately became liberated from material bondage. So, Srila Prabhupada mentions here a couple of things which are worth note-taking in terms of our own life. Of course, we are reading about Dhruv Maharaj, and we can't compare ourselves to Dhruv Maharaj. But at the same time, all these pastimes are giving us some lesson this way or the other. Yesterday, we did a beautiful discussion on how the deity form reciprocates with us by taking services, providing opportunities for services. And today's verse talks about a situation of being, or we can say, how to be mukta linga. So how to be liberated from material bondage. But before that, there are a few things about Dhruv Maharaj's samadhi, the transcendental bliss that he's getting. So because Dhruv Maharaj is constantly engaged in devotional service, so this is because of Dhruv Maharaj's tapasya. All his life he has led a life of austerity since childhood. So we see that because Dhruv Maharaj is constantly engaged in hearing, chanting, remembering, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. So he's all totally surrendered in all his 9 varieties of devotional service. So because somebody has done this much tapasya in devotional service, this means he becomes really, really strong in devotional service. Srila Prabhupada writes, there are different symptoms which appear in the body of a devotee. But when somebody is constantly engaged in devotional service. So this constant engagement in devotional service results in the symptoms which appear in the body of a devotee. But the devotee actually is not looking for these symptoms. He's not doing these, he's not engaged in devotional service to, as a result, to get these Ashta Sattvika Vikara. He is totally unconscious of this, which means that these, at that stage when somebody experiences Ashta Sattvik Vikar, he is in extreme transformation and he's not in his material consciousness. Therefore, he's going to experience Ashta Sattvika Vikara, which refers, when Dhruv Maharaj here is experiencing Ashta Sattvika Vikara, it is an automatic process that which happens automatically, naturally to a devotee. He doesn't endeavor for this Ashta Sattvika Vikara. And in this, the devotee actually totally forgets his bodily existence. And we have had read Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Antalila, Bhagavan. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is experiencing that. And there are innumerable examples of devotees experiencing Ashta Sattvika Vikara. So here, the end results of Dhruv Maharaj's tapasya, we see are coming in here in our understanding that Dhruv Maharaj is experiencing all these things. And now that he has ruled for so many years, 36,000 years, and he's now retiring. So we also see, yesterday we read about where Dhruv Maharaj is. So Dhruv Maharaj is in Badrika Ashram in text number 17. He is in Badrika Ashram. And we definitely have to acknowledge the glories of holy places. So before Badrika Ashram is where the holy rivers confluence, is a confluence of Saraswati and Alakananda. And this is, now holy places have a natural benediction on devotees. So there is automatically a transformation in persons who go to holy places. There's a huge transformation that happens when we go to holy places with the right consciousness. So we see that there's so many similarities if we actually see from now and before. So Dhruv Maharaj, when he went to Madhuvan, that's a holy place where this benediction was given, when he could see the Lord Prishni Garbha, and all those desires, or I don't want to go back to the same story again, but looking at it, we see the importance of holy places here is tremendous and worth acknowledging. So the holy places bestows benedictions to a devotee, and to anybody actually. So to a devotee, definitely there is huge to take. So it transforms the consciousness. And here, Dhruv Maharaj was also benefited in the previous holy place, that was Madhuvan. So now he's reaching, he's perfected himself, and he's going back to Godhead. Now he's about to leave. And in this going back to Godhead, he's attaining the ultimate perfection here. So if we actually talk a little bit about Ashta Sattvika Vikara, the devotee actually completely forgets his bodily existence, it says. And it should be, that devotee should be understood as liberated. So what is Ashta Sattvika Vikara? We can go from here to Nectar of Devotion, chapter 28, where the Ashta Sattvika Vikaras are talked about. So when a devotee is always intensely affected by love for Krishna, so when does that happen? When the devotee is in love, the love arises, and there's a constant, the devotee can't really live even one moment without Krishna or without thinking about Krishna. And he's in a direct relationship with him, or even little apart from him. This state is where he has awakened his ecstatic love for him. And these symptoms, what are the symptoms of Ashta Sattvika Vikara? So if we actually read from page number 223 of my book, we can say Nectar of Devotion. If you have, you can read. So Nectar of Devotion, chapter 28. So there are 8 symptoms of existential ecstatic love: becoming stunned, perspiring, standing of the hairs on the body, faltering of the voice, trembling in the body, changing of bodily colors, and shedding of tears and devastation. So the scientific explanation of these 8 symptoms is given by Srila Rupa Goswami as follows. When the vital force of life is in contact with the earth, it is stunned. When the same force comes into contact with water, there is the shedding of tears. When the same force comes into contact with fire, there is perspiration. When the force comes in contact with the sky, there is complete devastation. And when that force comes in contact with the air, there is trembling, failing of the voice, and standing of the hairs on the body. Now, these symptoms are manifested internally and sometimes externally. The pure devotee always feels such symptomatic expressions within himself. Always. Always is that word. Wow. But being afraid of outsiders, he does not generally manifest them externally. This doesn't mean that the devotee is afraid of others and he is afraid of being misunderstood, or he is afraid of taking these Ashta-sattvika vikara as really, really cheap. These are not cheap symptoms. So for us to understand from the Ashta-sattvika vikara is, in terms of Dhruva Maharaj and ourselves, is Dhruva Maharaj did not call any of his associates to say, to see that, now see, I'm going to meditate now, and then I'll be in samadhi, and then there'll be trance. Please come and see. I'll have Ashta Sattvika Vikara, and please take a photo or something like that. What happens with us? We want to acknowledge everything that's happening. So in that case, we have to be very, very careful of dealing with this topic of Ashta-sattvika vikara. As Srila Prabhupada mentions, when the constant engagement in devotional service continues, always, these symptoms will naturally appear or naturally manifest in a pure devotee. So we should, and devotee actually is not really looking for these Ashta-sattvika vikara. His aim is not to have those as his to have the symptoms of Ashta-sattvika vikara. Now, where do we read about Ashta-sattvika vikara? Every morning we pray, and there's this Romanchakam Shutaranga Vajo Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam. So the important point for us to take away is, when does that happen? It happens when we are serving the spiritual master, when we serve Krishna, and that through serving, through constant engagement in devotional service, this happens. Also, there's in Shiksha Ashtakam, when Nayanam Galada Shrudhareya Vadanam Gat Rudhaya Gira Pulakair Nichitam Vapukada Tavanam Grihane Bhavishyate. For him, for a devotee, these symptoms, when will they occur? The reason being, because here the devotee is not asking that these should occur, saying that when this will occur, when that moment of 12 years, that one moment seems to be a big span of 12 years, which means I cannot live without Krishna. My existence is zero without Krishna. So we understand the position of Dhruva Maharaj from here. But Srila Prabhupada has actually given us a very, very interesting way of detaching ourselves from the material existence. Why? How? Dhruva Maharaj's example here of, because he's totally detached from everything, therefore he is able to go to trance. He's able to have this experience of Ashta-sattvika vikara. So, and the moment somebody internally, the pure devotee experiences this is to be understood that he is liberated. So in very clear points, Srila Prabhupada mentions that this is not to be imitated. And then he is no longer engaged in the body. Now, why are we in this body? We are in this body because we are attached to the material nature. So as long as we are attached here, we will not be able to leave this material body. So the example Srila Prabhupada gives here is when there's this coconut, when a coconut becomes completely dry. I'm sure all of us have seen the oily dried coconut which we use as dry fruits. So that coconut pulp within the coconut shell, how does it separate? It separates from the bondage of shell and the outer covering. So the moment there's outer covering, but because the coconut is ripe, it is not dry, it's attached to the shell. But when it's dried, the pulp actually loses connection with the shell. So when we actually move it, we see this kind of sound, and we know that it's dry already. So we break the coconut shell and then we take the dried coconut. So by moving the dry coconut, one can hear that the pulp within it is no longer attached to the shell or the covering. Similarly, how does this example help us in our understanding of we being attached to the coconut? How does it dry? It dries by the process in devotional service, by constantly remembering, constantly hearing, chanting, remembering all the 9 processes, or any one of the 9 processes. And when one is fully absorbed in devotional service, he's completely disconnected. He is there, but he's completely disconnected to the shell or disconnected to the body. Now, we may not misunderstand this point here, as disconnect means not taking care of his body. When we see Srila Prabhupada is one example which we can actually relate to and find, and Srila Prabhupada's disciples as well. They are in the body, but they're not attached to the body. And Srila Prabhupada, even at the time of leaving his body, he's reciting Srimad Bhagavatam purports. So what is this example? This example tells us that coconut, which is fully dried, devotee, pure devotee who's fully absorbed in devotional service, he's not connected to the material body, which is an inclusion of subtle and gross bodies. So Dhruv Maharaj has actually attained this stage of life. How? By constantly discharging devotional service. So there's a great hope for us that how to get rid of this material attachments? By totally absorbing ourselves in devotional service. So Dhruv Maharaj attained this stage of life by constantly discharging devotional service. He's already been described as Mahabhagavat. So here, Dhruv Maharaj has perfected his life by taking a very perfect route. The perfect route by becoming a first-class pure devotee. And these symptoms are not visible. You remember a few weeks ago in the previous chapters, we were talking about Dhruv Maharaj fighting, killing the yakshas, and we had so many, but these symptoms are not clearly visible in a pure devotee. So Lord Chaitanya exhibited these symptoms, but we can read Ante Leela, which is full of Lord Chaitanya's ecstatic symptoms, and Thakur Haridas. So we can just definitely, we should take Thakur Haridas's example today, because it is his disappearance, and we seek blessings from him. There are so many examples here, but one of the examples, when there was a snake charmer in Chaitanya Bhagavat, Adi chapter, I don't remember the chapter actually. I think 12 or 16. So in this, there's a snake charmer. The snake charmer actually brings the snake out and in. But seeing the snake, Haridas Thakur became so ecstatic. He got this remembrance of, he got reminded of which Leela of Krishna. Does anyone of you remember?
Krishna Kaliya.
Krishna
Kaliya.
Kaliya, yes. He got so ecstatic in seeing the snake. So these exhibited in him as well. So there are many pure devotees who manifested such bodily symptoms. Srila Prabhupada warns us these are not to be imitated. But when somebody is actually advanced, these symptoms are exhibited, and this will not naturally come. So then we don't have to judge that devotee. Now, there's heaps of things about, there's heaps of misunderstanding in terms of experiencing, for example, tears. We may cry in front of the deity, but that doesn't put us that we are pure devotees. We may be crying for some material purpose, or for some material benediction from Krishna, or whatever it be. In the beginning of devotional service, the path of liberation immediately opens. So which means there's another point here, mukti. We're talking about mukti here. For a devotee, mukti is not the goal, and he's not even seeking that. But the moment, from the beginning of devotional service, the path of liberation immediately opens, which means that for a devotee, mukti serves and is automatically received. So even if we are beginners, it immediately is opened. The door to liberation is opened. But the only thing is we just have to be dry. So just as the coconut taken from the tree immediately begins to dry, it simply takes some time for the shell and pulp to separate from one another. So hopeful. We don't have to feel like, oh, I'm not there. It's a very hope-giving purport by Srila Prabhupada, the promising purport by Srila Prabhupada, that it will take some time and we will be there, going back to Godhead. So the next word here, next paragraph here talks about the important word in this verse is mukta linga. Mukta means liberated, and linga means subtle body. Now, this tells us the transmigration of our soul. And what is happening here in this transmigration? That we are changing gross bodies, but we are still carrying our subtle bodies and with our desires. I want to do this. I want to do that. Something is missing. Next, what next? What next? And therefore, when he dies, when he dies, so he takes his subtle body along with him. He carries his new body. And while existing in the present body, the same subtle body carries him from one stage of life to another. This is very interesting. While I was reading this yesterday, this is very interesting. I'll read this again. While existing in the present body, the same subtle body carries him from one stage of life to another. How? By mental development. So this mental condition, the consciousness does not change. The consciousness changes according to the body. The body doesn't change according to the consciousness. So the mental condition of a baby is different from that of a boy. How can we differentiate? The mental condition of a baby. When the baby is very food conscious, that's all. And if you actually take the baby out without cloth as well, the baby is not worried about, oh, I'm without cloth here. But at the same time, the boy can't be. So you see the mental condition, how that's different. So the mental condition of a boy is different from that of a young man. And the mental condition of a young man is different from that of an old man. So the process of dehinosmin yatha, dehe, at death, the process of changing bodies takes place due to the subtle body. Very, very clear point here, that the process of changing body takes place because we want to carry forward the desires. We want to carry on. We want to just keep going. The mind, intelligence, and ego carries the soul from one gross body to another. This tells that right now, at this stage, we are preparing for our next life. And this is called transmigration of the soul. Transmigration. We are just moving. And there is another stage when one becomes liberated, even from the subtle body. And that's the time when when we can go back to Godhead. Now, does that put us a question that do we carry mind, intelligence, and ego back home, back to Godhead? Would anyone like to participate in this question? Do we take our mind, intelligence, and ego to the spiritual world?
No, Mataji. It did get dissolved before we could get back to Godhead.
Yes, it dissolves. Anybody else who would like to give their opinion?
Yeah, it becomes separated because the false ego is going to be very, very, what is called, minimal stage, or sometimes it is not. So when the false ego is separated from the subtle body, then becomes liberated.
Okay. Is there anyone else who wants to?
We'll acquire the true intelligence and true ego.
Yes, Prabhuji. Yes, yes. The mind, because the mind is always busy with satisfying the senses. The senses are spiritual senses. So mind doesn't have to work a lot there. But ego is our existence. And as Nandvat Prabhu mentioned that it is in dissolved form. Now, dissolve here means purified form. So mind, intelligence, and ego carries him to a new body, which means at the end, what happens? We get rid of this subtle body. And as we get rid of the subtle body, which is material mind, material intelligence, material ego, which transforms itself to false ego. That's why we are here. That's why I am saying this is mine. And this is the reason for me being attached here. So another stage when we are liberated, even from the subtle body, because subtle body is where I'm carrying life after life. At that time, the living entity is competent, which means he has attained pure perfection and pure devotional service towards the Lord. So there's no tinge of, he has attained his real ego. And our real ego is our identity. Ego is not something which is, we say like pride, or we often misunderstand the word ego as, oh, he's got so much ego. Now, this is a common misunderstanding, but ego actually, ego means my identity. Now, when I come to this material world, my identity takes up false designations. And because of that, this ego becomes false ego.
Yeah.
And this false ego confuses us all the time and wants us, because this material world is so full of varieties that I want to enjoy and enjoy and enjoy, and my limit of enjoyment never ever stops. In that case, when I'm liberated from this attachments here, I attain my real identity, which is my spiritual identity, and my intelligence works only to serve Krishna. That's it. So as Nandraj Prabhu says, that this is dissolved. This subtle body is dissolved. This is so interesting. And then he's transferred to the spiritual world, where he's serving constantly the Supreme Personality of Godhead in different rasas, in different varieties of services. So therefore, the symptoms of the bodily symptoms of, or the description of the bodily symptoms of Sri Dhruva Maharaj makes it apparent that he becomes perfectly fit to be transferred to the spiritual world, because he has perfected himself. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada writes here in the end, one can experience the distinction between the subtle and gross bodies even daily. In a dream, one's state is one's gross body is lying on a bed, while the subtle body carries the soul, the living entity, to another atmosphere. But because the gross body has to be continued, the subtle body comes back and settles in the present gross body. But once it leaves as at death, it never comes back in. We already have planned, we already have decided, we already have formed in our mind intelligence that next body is what by our subtle enjoyment propensities, we get our next body. So to get the next body, that's therefore Srila Prabhupada mentions here, have the desire to go back to Godhead. So when this is put in our mind and intelligence, then the preparation begins. Now I want to go back to Godhead, going back to Godhead, going back to Godhead, going back to Godhead. And this becomes ingrained in us. And then we start following the desires of mind and intelligence and soul. And this false ego starts shedding the falseness, because then he realizes through his intelligence that this place is not for me. And therefore, he becomes free from his subtle body also. This freedom is freedom from the gross and subtle body, which is Mukta Linga. So we can't take contaminated bodies to the spiritual world. And therefore, we just need to be very careful about this point. What's the time? I have this much to say today. If time allows, I would really want to read the schedule of Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur. I don't know if I have time. Prabhuji, can I just quickly read a little bit about Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur? Because it's his appearance day.
Yes, Madhavi, still got time. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just read a little bit from Jaiva Dharma. So Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, born 1838, is a prominent Acharya in Gauriya Vaishnava Sampradaya. He was a pioneering spiritual leader, a householder, a magistrate working in colonial India under the British rule, a prolific preacher, writer, poet. He wrote volumes of books reintroducing the pure teachings of Lord Chaitanya at a time when those teachings had practically become lost. He composed hundreds of devotional songs glorifying Krishna to uplift the consciousness of the suffering people of this world. He corresponded with philosophers, theologians, leaders, scholars, and professors of his time and sent books, including the life and precepts of Lord Sri Chaitanya, to university libraries in foreign countries, planting the seeds of a worldwide movement of Krishna consciousness. Bhakti Vinod Thakur discovered and excavated the birthplace of Lord Sri Chaitanya, and along with his beloved wife, Bhagavati Devi, he raised 10 children, including the illustrious Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who would become a great spiritual leader of his own time and the spiritual master of ISKCON's founder Acharya, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. So it's our great-grandfather's appearance day. And I'm always amazed at this, how Bhakti Vinod Thakur actually did not waste even 1 minute of his time. And he is called the ideal time management role model for all of us. So he's 1 second of human life wasted in vain. Research for and planning for happiness in the material world can never be replaced. So he was an efficient utilizer of time. So he used to rest only from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Then write from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. he used to write. And then from 4 a.m. to 4:30 a.m. he used to rest that time again. And then 4:30 a.m. to 7 a.m. chant japa. 7 a.m. to 7:30 he used to write letters, correspondence, whatever. And 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. he used to study Shastra. 9:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. bathe, take simple prasadam. And then 10 to 1 he has his court duties. 1 to 2 he would refresh at home. And then 2 to 5 he would again have court duties. And he would be just very, very efficient in dealing all his court duties. Then 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., he would translate Sanskrit Shastras to Bengali. And from 7 to 8, he would bathe and take simple prasadam. It's like all back to back. So he rested just 3 hours so that he could fit his studies and japa. And this is amazing. I mean, this is very, very inspiring for me, especially, who's never able to manage time properly. So with this, we can glorify our acharyas, Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai, Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare
So
Krishna Mataji. Oh, sorry.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Sir, can I ask a question?
Yes, Prabhuji, if I can.
The question is, as you mentioned, and Nanda Prabhu also mentioned that, that the subtle body gets diluted or dissolves, and then the soul just leaves this material body and goes to spiritual. So because I was reading some text somewhere, and it says the subtle body becomes purified because of the complete connection with the devotional service. It transforms into impurities to pure one. Is that one, or it gets dissolved?
So dissolve here, Prabhu, means, maybe Nanbash Prabhu can tell more about it. Dissolve here means dissolved of all material contamination, because we can't get rid of ego. Ego is our identity. And mind's job is not to satisfy our senses, because we've got spiritual senses by the time we reach spiritual world. So it's not really looking for self-sense gratification. So mind, intelligence, and ego is in purified form, which is to say that we don't go with mind, intelligence, and ego. That's it. Because we have already, because there's no difference between soul and body in the spiritual world. Like we have read in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that Janma Karma Chame Divyam, which means Krishna's body and Krishna's soul is non-different. There's nothing like, there's no concept of body and soul in the spiritual world. But Nandapraj Prabhu can please enlighten us a little bit more on this, if it's okay.
Thanks, Maria. I think you explained quite well. It's just that when you say dissolve, means that the material senses, material ego, material intelligence, and material false ego, they all get dissolved, means get purified and become one with the spirit soul. Because there's no distinction in the spiritual with the spiritual body and the material senses. You cannot go there. So basically, get purified and goes to the spiritual world. They want to get a spiritual body, spiritual senses, spiritual intelligence, spiritual ego. Spiritual pure ego means spiritual ego, our identity. So all this false designation get dissolved, get eliminated. I think somewhere further in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada explained all this very nicely.
Yes.
Thank you.
We don't go in contaminated state to the spiritual world.
My question was, is this transformed into transformed into a pure state? Whether this pure state or dissolved. Dissolves means different, and transformed into a, that's why I have to clarify.
Srila Gurudev mentioned clearly that we don't go with mind, intelligence, and ego, which clearly means that it's in the purified, and there's no difference between subtle body, gross body, like that. So we attain the spiritual form. We attain the spiritual body with all purified, everything.
Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Anybody else got any comments or clarification, reflections? You still got a few minutes. We can discuss this point a little bit. Dhruva Maharaj already had seen the Lord face to face, like this, and just by the touch of Lord Vishnu's conch, he got all the knowledge. So at that stage, he was like liberated. So I was a bit amazed that he has to go through this Ashtanga Yoga again to become free from his body and attain the spiritual world. So he went twice. First, he got under the instruction of Narad Muni. He was able to do the very severe tapasya, and he was able to see the Lord. Now, towards the end of his life, he retires to Bhadrakashram and this Ashtanga Yoga. So how can we reconcile this? I mean, I thought he was already liberated when he met the Lord.
Yes, Prabhuji, definitely he's liberated, but he's showing us a path, and the time that he is in is Satyug. So the process of meditation is there, and because of meditation, that's the process where he actually is able to enter into trance. That's his time of having those ecstatic symptoms. Yeah, he has to have a way of going. So yes, it's quite interesting that he starts with Ashtanga Yoga and finishes also with Ashtanga Yoga. And it's, yeah, based on time, the time that this pastime has taken is Satya Yoga, and that's the process. The process of meditation is a way of going back to Godhead, like in Kali Yuga.
Probably in the Satya Yuga, that was the method. Huh?
Yes, like Kali Yuga, chanting Sankirtan and chanting of the holy name is the process of going back to Godhead. So as it's mentioned in the purport itself that he's a Mahabhagavat, so he perfected by taking a perfect route. So all his life, he has taken a perfect route of serving the Lord in all 9 processes, or some processes from the 9. And he never disobeyed any of his spiritual masters. And in the following verses, it's all the more interesting to see how it reveals.
Okay, we'll wait for tomorrow's verse. Tomorrow, His Grace Prana Prabhu is going to give a class in the morning.
Jai. Wow.
Yeah. Can I add something, Mataji, if you permit?
Yes, Prabhu, please.
This initially, Dhruva Maharaj got the instruction, got the benediction, but he didn't experience it. So through this process, he experienced whatever the instruction, benediction he got. I think that's what it is. The process is through this Satyayug, with the meditation, he got all the process and then experienced, and finally got the liberated stage. So the Sambandha, Vidya, Avidya, and Prayojan, all 3 states are achieved. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. I think, I'm not sure Mataji is still there or not.
Yes, Prabhuji, I'm still here. Okay.
That's what one explanation Prabhu gave. Okay, maybe everybody can have another look at this topic later on. We can expand on it. Maybe
Yes.
Mataji can check with them very much.
Yes, Prabhu. Just a quick thing. I got a bit digressed, Prabhu. I'm really sorry. What do I need to check with my Guru Maharaj? You said.
No, this question, Dhruva Maharaj had initially did so much severe tapasya, and he actually saw the Lord face to face. And then he ruled for like 36,000 years. And towards the end, he goes to jungle Bhadrakashram and does tapasya, Ashtanga Yoga, and then he gets liberated back to Godhead. So in the first case, we see he's like, because he got the benediction, he always see the Lord, he's like liberated, a Mahabhagavat. So where is there any need for him to do this Ashtanga Yoga to say? Or he could have.
Okay. So you want me to ask this from Guru Maharaj, is that so?
Yeah, that could be some interesting reflection. So what's coming from Maharaj. Thank you.
Sure, we can ask that. So,
Okay, anybody else got any comments, questions, reflections? We got a few minutes. Doesn't seem to be Mati. Thank you very much, Mati, coming forward. It's such a long purpose, so many points to take away points, and you explained so nice. Thank you very much. I grace Radha Padma Mataji ki jai. Srila Prabhupada,
Prabhupada ki jai,
Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaur Bhakti Pratam Jai Bhagavatam. Panchakta Patrabhesha Kripa
Saram Bhavani Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.
Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai, all saints ki